All right, so I'd like to welcome all of you again to today's online academy. Today's topic is the creation of curved parts in imos. For those of you who have been working with imos before or for a longer time now, you'll probably already know that it is possible to create curved parts using the object designer and the part designer. The main difference here is that you can now basically create curved parts along the surfaces of articles that have been created using the article designer, which wasn't directly possible before. And this is a handy feature that is new in imos 12. So let's get started. Basically, the flow of the presentation is we'll start by creating a polyline, and then we'll create the curved parts from that. And afterwards, we'll look at the modifiers that have been applied. And finally, we'll be able to see the end product, which looks something like what I have prepared here. So let's open our imos. The first thing we'll see here is a very standard article. If we look at it in the realistic point of view, we'll see that it is a very common article with standard parts created using the article designer. Now, the prerequisite for creating a curved part on such an object is that you basically need a polyline. The polyline is what will define the shape of the surface that you want to form. So in this case, we want to form the front of the article, so we need a polyline with the shape, with the given shape that we want to apply to the front of this article. So I'm going to switch back to the 2D wireframe visualization, and I'll start by creating a polyline. So as usual, I'll take the polyline command, and I'll start to draw a line from the outermost corner of my bottom shelf, of my side panel, sorry, and I'll just drag it to this side 80 millimeters, and we'll drag our mouse to the outside of the article and give it a distance of 50 millimeters. Then we'll drag our mouse to the right, and we could select the center of our article and drag it there. We can also give a defined measurement, and in this case I've measured the center of the article before, which is 320 millimeters, and I'll confirm with enter. All right, so let's look at it from the top view. The next thing I'll do is I'll take this line and I'll move it away from the article, because in the following steps we'll be creating circles from which we'll create the curves, and just to avoid getting our lines mixed up, I'm basically going to move this line away from the article. So I'll right click and click on move and select the article, select the line, sorry, and just move that 30 millimeters away from the article. That way the lines of the article itself aren't standing in the way of anything. And the next thing I'll need is a circle. So I'll just draw any circle anywhere basically and give it a radius of 80 millimeters. And then I'll take the circle and I'll move it from the upper middle to this corner right here. Once I've done that, I'll move it again from that corner 20 millimeters to the left. And this will basically form the first transition of our curved line. The next thing we need is another circle. So I'll choose the command again, and this time we'll define it using the TTR, so the tan radius command, which is at the bottom of my screen in the command bar. So I'll select that, and then I have to select the first tangent, which will be this part of the circle, and the second tangent, which will be this line. And then I'll give it a radius of 225 millimeters. That way, we have basically created all the parts necessary for our curved line. All we need to do now is trim the excess parts of the lines that we don't need. So there is this handy command from AutoCAD here, which is called trim, and that allows me to choose the parts from which I'd like to remove certain lines, and I'll just select these two first, confirm with a right click, and then I'll select the parts that I want to remove. So this for one, this one, and this part of the line, of the circle, sorry, and these parts as well, and I'll confirm with a right click, enter, and you can already see that our curved line is taking shape here. We just need to trim off the rest of this circle and the rest of the baseline here. So again, I'll take the trim function, select the objects that are affected, confirm with a right click, and then I'll be able to remove the excess parts of the circles and the lines that I don't need, and I'll confirm again with the enter. And that leaves me with a nice and smooth curved line. So the next thing I need to do is complete this line on the other side as well. For that, I'll select the line and I'll go to the mirror function. Now I'm prompted to specify the axis on which I want to mirror this line. So I'll select this this end point of the line here, and I'll drag my mouse to the bottom. I can move it around so I can change the angle from which it should be mirrored. If I have the ortho modus turned off, then I can freely define the angle at which it should be mirrored. But for the sake of this experiment or this presentation, we'll basically turn on the ortho modus and drag our mouse to the bottom of the screen and confirm with enter. Sorry, let's repeat that again. Now we're prompted to decide whether we want to erase the source object, which is basically this here. This is the source object. In this case, we don't want to erase the source object because we need it to have a full smooth curved line. So we'll select no. And that leaves me with a series of lines that aren't defined to be one complete line. So that's the next thing we have to do. We need to define or we need to basically join these separate segments. So I'm going to select the p-edit command from AutoCAD, click enter, and now I have to choose one part of this line, and I'll say that I want to join this line with the following lines, like that. And I'll confirm with a right click, and that leaves me with one complete line basically. And this is now the line onto which the surface of our article will be changed or adjusted to. Okay, so before we continue, maybe we can extend the length of this line in the case, for example, that I want to change the surface of a wider article, for example, in the future. So this is enough for now. All right, so the next step is basically creating the curved parts. And for that, we need to select the parts that we want to curve up. So we'll take the fronts of our article. So let's select the door and the other door. And then, well, we get our selected parts listed up in our elements section, and at the bottom of our imos manager we have a new command which says, well, in our method section, which says basically extend surface to polyline, and this is the command that allows me to create curved parts. Once I click this, I'm prompted to select the polyline from which I'd like to adapt the shape. So I'll select this polyline, and you'll immediately already see that imos has regenerated the drawing with the adjusted curved parts. One thing you might notice is that the parts are extraordinarily large. They've taken the shape of the whole polyline and not just the shape of the defined part that we need. So for that, we have this properties section where we can define all of these kinds of characteristics. So we'll look at that one by one. So let's start at the top. The first option I have is to define the face of the part. So I can define the bottom side or the top side. If I define it on the top side, the side of the door will change. So right now it's on the top of the line, and this way it's at the bottom of the line. So that basically allows me to control the side. The second thing I have is the offset, so I can give an offset of 20 millimeters, for example, and move the part, give it an offset basically. For this case, we don't need any offset because we've already created the offset by moving the line 30 millimeters to the front. We can move it back using this offset function, but for this example, we won't do that. The next setting that I have is the project size setting, and this basically allows me to define whether the surface should take the width of the whole polyline or if it should only take the necessary section of the line which is basically affected. So let's look at the effect of that. We'll say project size yes, and you'll see that the curved part, it has taken the shape of the polyline, but it has only done so with the size of the original door. So it basically allows me to project the original size of the door onto the polyline, which in this case is what we want to achieve. And finally, I have the option to enable or disable the connection scan. In this case, I'd like to enable it. So I'll say connection scan yes. And I'll confirm with the green check mark. And that's basically it for now. I mean, creating the curved parts basically. The connection scan has adjusted the hinges. It has adjusted the handles of my doors. And that leaves me with the rest of the article that I need to modify now as well. So the first thing I'll have to do is modify these edges of the outside parts and the edges of the inside parts. What I also have to do is move this stop bar to the proper position. The reason this hasn't moved is because this is just a stretchable purchase part and it isn't defined as a connector. So the connection scan has no effect on the stop bar. So let's move that manually. If you've been using imos, hopefully you'll know that you are able to use AutoCAD functions on certain parts when you have the 3D mode activated. So let's select this part and right click and turn on the 3D workings mode. And that allows me now to use AutoCAD functions to edit this or the position of this 3D or of this stop bar. So I'll select the green line, which is basically the same as the blue square that appears when you turn on the 3D working mode on a flat part, so a door or a side panel or so on. And then I'll right click and I'll select move, and then I'll have to select the point from which I'd like to move the stop bar, and I'd like to move it into this direction with 80 millimeters, and I'll confirm, and then I can turn off the 3D working mode again. So 3D working's off. Let's look at it from the top view, and we can see that it has adjusted its position in the way that we want it to. Okay, so that leaves us with the edge modifications. First thing I'll do is select or choose this select edges function here, and then I can choose the edges that are affected. So I'll choose the top shelf, bottom shelf, and the side panels. So confirm with a right click, and in the methods section, I'll have the option to, under joint functions, extend to polyline. So I'll double click on that, and I'll choose the polyline and confirm. And we'll see once again that the edges have been modified as well as my hinges and my cam connectors and so on. So finally, we need to modify the edges of the interior parts. And the reason we did that separately is because we'll give these edges an offset as well afterwards. So again, I'll choose the select edges function and click this edge and this edge, confirm with a right click. And in our methods section, again, we'll have to choose the extend to polyline method and select our polyline, confirm with the green check mark, and our edges are still selected, so we can choose the move function and give it an offset of 20 millimeters. That way they basically don't hit against the door. I will confirm with a green check mark again. And that is basically how to create the curved parts for our door and how to create the necessary modifications to create or to complete the construction of an article. Now, what if I want to, well, save these modifications that I've made so that I don't have to redo all these editings every time I want to set up this article? Because as you know, the original article that I've built using the article designer, it doesn't have any of these modifications. The original article is flat. And for that, we have the option to save these modifications globally. So to do so, first we need to select our article. As you can see here, this article has a little Allen key or a wrench, which basically tells us that this article has been modified, and here's the original article which hasn't been modified. So once you select this article, out of the menu bar, you have the option to look at the article-related modifications. Once you choose that, you'll basically get a list of all the modifications that you've done or that you've done on this article. If we look at this, we first have our fronts, which we have extended to the polyline. Then we have the connection scan, which was started out of the extend surface to polyline function. We had the option to select if we want to activate the connection scan, which basically allowed us to move the position of the hinges. Then we edited the position of the stop bar, and we edited the the edges of the top shelf, the bottom shelf, and the side panels. Once again, the connection scan was started to adjust the linear divisions or the descriptors of these connectors. And we extended again the surface or the edges to the polyline for the inner parts of the article. Once again, the connection scan was started. And finally, we moved the edges for which, again, the connection scan was started. Now I have the option at the top here to transfer these modifiers into the global recording of the article. And I have the option to transfer these modifications to, or to save these modifications order related, so that every time I open this order and I place the article, it will come with the modifications. So in this case, we'll see that this function is still deactivated, and the reason for that is that I basically need to save the order first. So I'm going to close this for now, and let's save the order, and we'll call it Online Academy Curved Parts. Confirm. Let's overwrite the data, not a problem. Once it's done saving, we can now go ahead and save these, transfer these modifiers into the order related recording of this article. So that basically, to get this function enabled, you basically have to save the order. Otherwise, imos doesn't know where to save these modifications. So in this case, let's save these modifiers into the global recording because I want this article to be opened in many orders and not just this one. So I'll save this globally and say yes and confirm. And imos will update. Yes. The article which I have placed into the drawing space before. So now if I even open a new order and I place the article in the drawing space, I'll immediately see that these modifications have been saved globally and that they'll be set up no matter which order I have, or that no matter which order I'm working on, basically. And that brings me to the end of my presentation for what's new imos 12, creating curved parts.